having a growth mindset allows you to ameliorate those feelings and feel, more, if not confident, at least that you can conquer the things that you feel need adjustment. I mean, because no one is perfect, and we're all going to make mistakes, but we can't let those mistakes define us.
This is Your Morning Basket, where we help you bring truth, goodness, and beauty to your homeschool day. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 92 of the Your Morning Basket podcast. I'm Pam Barnhill, your host, and I'm so happy that you're joining me here today. Well, growth mindset for kids is something that we hear talked about often in the homeschool world these days. The buzzword just seems to be everywhere. But something we don't hear talked about often is growth mindset from a Christian perspective. And that's why I'm so happy to have Ginny Kochis on the podcast today. We always want to be having positive self-talk, but as a Christian people, we also want to remember that God is there to help us with that. And that's exactly what Ginny and I are going to be chatting about today. Now, if you would like to have more conversations about this episode of the podcast, we would love to have you join us in the Your Morning Basket community. It is absolutely free, and you can come over and talk with other homeschoolers who are traveling this journey, practicing a morning basket, or just doing homeschooling. We would love to have you there, and you can find that at members.pambarnhill.com. And now, on with the podcast. Ginny Kochis is an author of multiple books, including Made for Greatness, a growth mindset journal for courageous Catholic youth. She is a blogger at Not So Formulaic, where she shares passionately about Catholic motherhood, homeschooling, and provides tons of resources for parenting differently wired kids. She also advocates for gifted and twice exceptional children through her private community, the Zele Society, which is a place specifically for moms who are raising and homeschooling gifted 2E children. But most importantly, she is a mom of 3, living the joys and the challenges of homeschooling. Ginny, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Pam. It's great to be here.
I am so happy that you're here. Start off by telling me a little bit about yourself and your homeschool.
Okay. Well, I'm a Catholic mom to 3 twice exceptional kids. I started homeschooling about 8 years ago when our oldest went to kindergarten first. She went to school, and it was not the greatest experience. What we didn't know, but what we do know now, is that she has high functioning autism. They identified her under the Asperger's umbrella, and they identified her also as, gifted. So she's a twice exceptional, which is a child who is gifted and has some sort of either learning or developmental disability. So for her, being in the classroom, she was reading at a very advanced level before she went into kindergarten. Being in the classroom with the kind of knowledge that she had already kind of amassed, and then just her inability really to figure out how to communicate her needs, her sensory needs, like her emotional needs. It was really not a good fit. So we decided to bring her home, and we started homeschooling her in first grade, and it just kind of grew from there. She has really blossomed with homeschooling and just, becoming a young woman. She's really, self-aware and really focused on her goals, which is really great to see. And then our 10-year-old, she has generalized anxiety disorder and OCD, which we learned about probably when she was in first or second grade. And I was already homeschooling her because she had a lot of anxiety, but we didn't really have a diagnosis. So keeping her home, having her at home was easier. It was a better environment for her to learn because there wasn't all the pressure. And then our youngest is 6, and he's in kindergarten, but he's a mess. I don't even know what to do with him. He's just super busy, and he never stops talking, and he's always moving. He's my first and only boy. So he is very much a boy, which I wasn't really anticipating, which, I mean, raising two girls first, and my girls are tomboyish, but he's just, man.
It's a totally different animal.
It really, really, really is. So that's what we're doing. We're just, I guess we've done lots of different things as far as curriculum is concerned. But right now we're using Catholic Heritage curricula and teaching textbooks and just kind of doing the best, taking the next step forward, doing the best we can every day. So.
Oh, that sounds great. It sounds like you're doing wonderfully. And I'm so glad that you define 2E in there, that twice exceptional kind of thing for us.
Yes.
So gifted and then some other exceptionality that, can cause struggles in a traditional school setting. And
yes,
a lot of parents who pull their kids out and homeschool for that very reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to have you on today to talk a little bit about the idea of growth mindset. So can you tell me, like, when people talk about this term, this growth mindset thing, which is quite frankly, a buzzword we've been hearing a lot about over the past few years, what exactly does it mean?
Okay. So growth mindset is when you see your challenges as stepping stones. It's the idea that you can always learn something new, that your skills aren't finite, and that the mistakes that you've made can help propel you forward if you look at them as learning opportunities. So it's kind of like an antidote to thoughts like, I'm not good at this. I'm not really a math person. This isn't something that's up my alley. The idea with growth mindset is that you take those skills, or you think of those skills or areas of expertise that are not your greatest, and see them as a way or an opportunity to always learn something new, every day, and become more of the person that you were meant to be, and that's the person that you can be. So the opposite of a growth mindset is what's referred to as a fixed mindset, where you are convinced that, okay, you know what? I had a really hard time with learning division. I'm not going to be able, I'm just not a math person. This just isn't something I can do. Or, I'm not a writer. Yeah, I'm really not a writer. I'm really not a reader either. I much prefer, the sciences, or even into, extracurricular activities like, I never really got to play soccer. I didn't get a lot of field time. So I'm just not an athletic person. Well, none of those things are really true. So, maybe you did have trouble with division. Maybe you do have trouble with writing. Maybe soccer was not really the best experience for you, but there are other ways to kind of take what you've learned from those moments and opportunities and turn them into something more or better or different. So that's what growth mindset is in a nutshell, basically.
Okay. And so this has a lot to do with the conversation that we're having with ourselves about ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. It involves a lot of self-reflection. It involves a lot of, I have always struggled with anxiety and depression. And so I recently started working with a therapist, and she's been helping me kind of develop my own growth mindset, and learn how to kind of retrain my brain from, the negative thoughts and things that pop into my head, like, I can't do this, to, okay, yes, I had trouble with this specific thing, but what did I learn from this? And how can I use that to continue or, change what I do the next time? So yeah, it is all about, the internal conversation that you're having, kind of that metacognition, that thinking about the way you're thinking. And that's, how we kind of retrain our brains to look at obstacles as opportunities.
Okay. I love it. Now, this is why I specifically wanted to have you on. How is the idea of growth mindset different in a Christian context?
Okay. So I think first we have to talk about the difference between desolations and consolations. So, sometimes the negative thoughts that we have are more than just negative thoughts. They're whispers from the evil one. And his desire is to pull us away from God. Okay. Right. So those thoughts like, I'm worthless. I can't do this. I have no talents in this area. Those are not thoughts that come from God. So on the other hand, you have consolations, which are feelings of peace and comfort that come from God. Like those moments where you just suddenly feel like, you know what, God is with me right now. And I feel, very I'm happy and I'm at peace. So it's kind of like there's this meme that I saw rumbling around Facebook, and it was a whole list of, things like Satan's voice rattles you, God's voice stills you. I mean, that is essentially what we're talking about with consolations and desolations. So in a Christian context, we're training, the brain to remember the purpose behind everything we do when we talk about growth mindset. So we look at the negative thoughts and the self-beliefs that are limiting, and we see those as desolations. And instead, we think about, what God wants us to be, who God wants us to be, because our challenges and struggles are opportunities to grow closer to Christ, to learn to trust him and lean on him, and to grow into the person that he wants us to be. So when you look at, when you compare a secular growth mindset to a Christian growth mindset, the things, what you're looking at is that with a secular growth mindset, it teaches children that they can do anything. But with a Christian growth mindset, you're teaching your children that they can do anything through Christ, who strengthens them. And I think that's, a really key point, because otherwise it's devoid of purpose. It's like, biting into a Boston cream donut and expecting to get, that really gooey stuff in the middle, and then it's empty. There's no substance to it. So, it's also in the fact that the secular growth mindset is rooted in personal achievement. So like in what I can do to make myself better and to succeed. But in a Christian growth mindset, it's rooted in the value of, what we can do for others, and, how we can learn from the suffering that we take on, the way that we carry our crosses. Because, the truth is, like, there's that saying that says, God doesn't send you, wait, what does it say? Now I can't remember.
He doesn't give you more than you can handle.
Yes. Thank you. Well, I mean, and that's not true. I mean, he really does, but and it's not to test us, but it's like, well, and see, now I'm going to contradict myself. It's like gold that's tested in fire, he's strengthening us and helping us to really, give like the gift of self, and, go through the flames of refinement, and become stronger in that way. So, and then the last point, the secular growth mindset is all about growth and ability. And the Christian growth mindset is all about growth in Christ. Like, what is God's will for your life? Who does he want you to be? What kind of person does he want you to be? What changes does he want you to bring about in the world? And, when you look at growth mindset in that way, it's not just, how can I turn my challenges into stepping stones, but how can I turn my challenges into something good for God?
I love that. And, it's, as a Christian, it feels great to know that I don't have to do this alone. I can't do this alone.
Right.
He gives me, if I ask for them, he gives me the graces that I need.
Absolutely.
And I am not out there. I don't just have to depend on myself. And
right.
So I love the idea of growth mindset, but I especially love it from a Christian perspective. So
yeah, I do too. I think it makes it all that more meaningful and useful, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're becoming more like Christ. I mean, that's what our growth is about, is really to become, to try.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
More like him.
Yeah. And it's not easy, that is like the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life.
No.
Yeah, no, it's not easy, because we always want to take, like, I think inherently there's just something about us, about humanity, where we just kind of want to do the easiest thing, and becoming like Christ is not easy. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, why do you think homeschoolers need to have a growth mindset?
I was thinking about that. Homeschooling is such a uniquely nourishing environment. And in a lot of ways, that's a really positive thing, but it can also have its downsides, where, at least I know for my children, if something is really giving them trouble, I am kind of, maybe I'm a little weak on it, but I'll say, it's okay. Let's put this aside and we'll come back to it later. So, I mean, they are eventually going to come back to it. But I think, if I were, reflecting on myself and in my own journey with growth mindset, if I were going to set, a strong example, I would say, okay, let's take a look at the struggles that we're having and see how we can use those to, help us solve this problem. So, what have you learned sitting here staring at this math problem? Have you learned maybe that patience is a little hard to come by when you're stressed out? Have you learned that maybe there are some topics, especially for gifted kids, when you're homeschooling, gifted children, lots of things come really easily, but then not everything does. So when something is harder to grasp, it's really valuable, I think, to be able to say, you know what, it's okay that this is hard, because what we're doing is we're strengthening those muscles, those heavy lifting muscles that we need to tackle those bigger things in life. So, but aside from, that aspect of homeschooling being the right environment in that way, it's also the perfect environment because you are teaching these skills without kind of the distraction or peer pressure or fear of comparison. So you're preparing your kids to have, this intrinsic motivation and this natural curiosity to want to learn on their own and to just enjoy discovery and be a part of learning new things. You're helping them, develop grit and tenacity, perseverance, trustworthiness, all of these things that they're going to need when they go out into the real world so that they can pursue God's will, and change the world, like I mentioned earlier. It's a way that they can become cheerleaders for themselves and then cheerleaders also for their siblings. So I think it contributes overall to just an attitude that really makes your homeschool all that more special and unique, because it's not, we're sitting here, we're learning, this is school, but it's more like an approach to life. It's more of a, I'm a lifelong student, I'm an adventurer, I'm going to do what God has set out for me to do. I'm going to discern his will and I'm going to pursue that. And I think, that is a really important piece in a Christian homeschool.
Yeah. What about moms?
Oh gosh. Well, yeah, I mean, for moms, I've already talked about my own experience with it. I think, homeschooling is a heavy mental load, and motherhood is a heavy mental load. And it's really easy to get to the point where you start to question yourself across the board. Like, am I really a good mom? Am I really a good teacher? Am I really, am I doing the right thing for my kids? Like last night, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep, and all I could think about was how I haven't really been hugging my 10-year-old enough, and I was thinking to myself, gosh, she's probably so miserable. She's probably so starved for my touch. I'm not doing a very good job at this motherhood thing. And then this morning she comes downstairs, wrapped in her reindeer blanket that has a giant reindeer head. So she looks really cute and ridiculous.
We have a wolf blanket with a giant wolf head. Yes.
So you know what it's like. So she comes and plops down beside me, and I just look at her and say, I'm sorry I don't hug you enough. And she's like, what? I'm fine. You don't need to hug me. And I clearly, she's in that tween phase where she's not sure how she feels about, parental affection anyway. But it just, she was like, Mom, I've never felt like you don't love me enough, so having that, having that reassurance was nice. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Sorry. but
it was just so easy for you, even as a mom, even as a grown up, to fall into that pattern of, self-doubt and, talking badly to yourself.
Yeah.
And really that wasn't the reality.
No, not at all. And even it gets to the point where when you give yourself compliments, they're still kind of backhanded compliments. And my 6-year-old, God bless him, said to me today, Mom, I'm not sure if you're the best mom in the world, but you're a good one, And I was like, gosh,
thanks, kid.
Yeah. So I was thinking that's how I sound to myself, gosh, I'm pretty okay, but I think, having a growth mindset allows you to ameliorate those feelings and feel more, if not confident, at least that you can conquer the things that you feel need adjustment. So, because no one is perfect, and we're all going to make mistakes, but we can't let those mistakes define us or keep us from moving forward. So if you've developed that sort of desire to break out of the fixed mindset of, this isn't going to change, I'm not going to change, I can't change, then it's much easier, I think, to handle the homeschooling load, handle the motherhood load, and the load of, the mental load of being a wife too, because that's pretty hefty also. And it brings you closer to Christ through the day in, day out things that you're doing. It keeps you grounded in the purpose of everything that you're doing. So, the homeschooling, the mothering, all of it, it's all designed to bring your children to him and bring yourself closer to him.
Love it. Okay. So let's say I'm sitting here with my kids. It's morning time. And we're gathered around, and maybe I've noticed something going on. I'm going to let you pick the something. So give me an example of how we might work through an exercise or have a little conversation that would help build up some growth mindset of something I've been seeing in my children. You pick the thing.
Okay. So let's say there's a drama club. And there's an opportunity to audition for the next season's performance. And this particular child has tried out before, tried out a number of times, and has either been placed in the chorus. Let me I'm rephrasing it. Growth mindset.
I like it.
Placed in the chorus, or on a couple of occasions not cast. And so now this child is saying, I'm not sure I really want to, I'm not cut out for theater. I don't really want to do this, but deep inside that this is a child of yours who, basically eats theater for breakfast, really enjoys it. So the first thing that I would probably do is to encourage that self-reflection and kind of through a guided conversation, help my child begin to see what he or she has learned from the times that they were in the chorus. So, the fact that they learned how to be a team player, that they learned how to work well in a group, that they've sharpened their voice and acting skills, and then, going back and looking at maybe even some old recordings of the performances, if you have them, seeing like, this is how you started. This was the first performance you were in, and this is the most recent one. Let's see, what are some changes that you notice about yourself and how you've grown? So giving them something, concrete to say like, look, you really have made improvements. And then, it's okay, I think, to look at the areas where they still have some areas for growth and say, okay, so, what is it that you didn't like about what you saw in that performance? What do you think you could do differently? And then you can discuss, how are we going to improve those particular things? Like, let's make a game plan. Let's come up with, things that we can work on between now and the audition that would, help you maybe, get a result that's closer to what you're looking for. And also just teaching them to find joy in the process. So, if the particular audition for this particular drama club or company or whatever is causing a lot of stress, then just doing something that's way more fun, or not way more fun, but less pressure. So putting together, saying, why don't you and your friends, or why don't all of us, your family, let's write our own play. Let's write our own script. Let's put it on. We'll just do it for the neighborhood and it'll be a blast. So looking at alternative ways to kind of continue their growth in that area, but in a less stressful, more positive way. And I think, in other situations, there are ways, like if you're talking about academics, sitting down and reading, stories of like Alexander Graham Bell, who failed a bunch of times. He had a real hard time until he stumbled on the whole telephone. And then, even then there's like question about, whether or not he really, designed the phone and what he went on to do later. Or, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein is another one. He failed out of school, on multiple occasions and not had to be homeschooled. His parents decided to homeschool him because he wasn't, the classroom just wasn't the right place for him.
Right.
And look where he ended up. So, I think taking a break from, walking away from the studies, walking away from that really tough essay question, or from the chapter that you just can't get through, or that is, a giant struggle, and saying, let's read about Helen Keller, or, let's look at some people who have had difficulties and overcome them, and, see how that relates to you too. So it's more of a development of it's developing a mindset. It's like changing the way you approach your learning. So it's not so much how can we fix this issue right now? It's not like the flip of a switch. It's more a gradual development of a particular attitude that you build over time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think what happens is we fall into these habits of talking to ourselves this way. And so, if something ends up being difficult for us, then we immediately default to this habit of talking to ourselves.
Yes.
And so what we really have to do is change the habit of how we immediately react to something like this.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because what our brains do is they develop these, the brain always looks for the shortest pathway to something. And so it develops the neural pathway that you use, most often, and then it sticks to that. So you get sort of a recurring loop of behavior because, like you said, it's a habit. And in order to change that neural pathway, you have to, it's hard work. You have to retrain your brain to make those additional pathways, and then not just make them, eventually prefer them to other things, or to other more negative pathways. So
yeah, so this is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's like you're going to work on this.
Yes, no, that's very true.
I think one of the things is it'll be like after listening to the podcast, after me recording this with you and listening to you talk about it, this is going to be something that I'm going to start to notice in my kids and probably myself too. Oh yeah, that's what Ginny was talking about, that little thing right there. And then it can be redirected with, how can we approach this differently? What can we say to ourselves instead? So
yeah.
Well, now you also have another little aid that will help us in doing this. Tell us a little bit about your book, Made for Greatness, and what led you to write it.
Okay. Well, I wasn't happy. Well, I guess in the early, probably 2010, 2015, the school district we were living in, I used to be an educator. I was a high school English teacher, but the school district came up with a plan for teaching character. And it talked about, it talked about instilling in kids all the different virtues of a person who is kind, a person who is respectful, a person who is trustworthy, a person who is honest, and it was fine and good, but it was just like, I keep going back to that Boston cream donut analogy. It was like just fluff, there wasn't really any substance to it. And then I became a little more familiar with the concept of growth mindset around that same time. A Stanford University professor, Carol Dweck, wrote a book called Mindset, where she's kind of like the forerunner, the researcher behind this particular term. And so I had read in graduate school, I had read some of her work. And I felt like it was missing something. And I wanted to help my children develop a growth mindset, yes, but I wanted them to understand the purpose behind it, like I've been saying. So I decided, since I couldn't find one that was from a Christian perspective, and that's what I wanted, I decided I would write it myself. So I did. And what it does is it takes scripture and the virtues and stories of the saints and stories of Christian teens and young adults who have faced great obstacles and, challenges and overcome them. And it leads the reader through the development of a growth mindset, kind of like, one virtue at a time. So, it's, my kids have enjoyed reading it. I think it's helped them see the connection between redemptive suffering and the idea that, for us to grow, there are going to be growing pains, but, we are doing these growing pains to become closer to Christ. And, I've been happy with how they've received it. So.
I love it. And I have a copy here, except I can't find it. I think it's in my teens room.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's a good place for it to be.
Yeah, I was like trying to put my hands on it before we started the interview so I could flip through it. And I was like, no, it's not where I expected it to be. I think it ended up being somewhere else. So that's a good thing. But yeah, it's a great little book, and it has some readings and exercises and things in there, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, it has, it has discussion questions and scripture meditations, and then profiles of holy men and women, and then, profiles of regular Christian kids just doing the best they can. And those are written from the first person perspective. Like, I had contributors write their stories for me, and then I kind of modified them into the book. But yeah, I'm proud of it. And then, in the back, there's little suggestions for, there's a section on Say This, Not That, Growth Mindset Edition. There's an overview of growth mindset reminders for kids and their parents. There's plenty of places to take notes. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, what other resources could you share if moms are listening today and they're like, you know what, I've got this kid and they're always putting themselves down, and maybe this is something that we could work on. Mm-hmm. What other resources can you share for moms who want to teach their kids about having a growth but not a fixed mindset?
Sure. Well, I think Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, is a great resource. And also her TED Talk, which her last name is Dweck. So Carol Dweck. And, you can find her easily online. If you just Google Carol Dweck growth mindset, there's plenty of stuff.
Yeah.
Then I also, what was it? Oh, this is actually more of a recommendation of a book for moms. It's Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Made Simple. And while it's not necessarily growth mindset specifically, it's the same kind of principles, and it helps you learn how to retrain your brain. So, you moving away from the negative thoughts and the automatic negative thoughts toward more productive internal conversations. And so, it helps people overcome anxiety, depression, and also, those desolations. And I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, and the book is upstairs. But I can get you the author's name after the show, after we record. Yeah. And then I have, there's 3 scriptures that I think are really good. Hebrews 12, Philippians 4:13, and Psalm 139. Those are really good, I think, to either get printed for you or print them up and, hang around your house, and just, kind of keep them available so that you can read them, over and over again, and just meditate on them, and in what, the ways in which God loves us and how he supports us in the challenges that we have.
Sounds like that would be some great memory work for your morning basket.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It would. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ginny, tell everybody where they can find you online.
I'm at, and I rue the day I chose this web address, because I always, not only do I have trouble spelling it, I have trouble saying it, but at this point, I'm not going to change it. But it's www.notsoformulaic.com. And that's where I am.
And we will link to it in the show notes. So you can just go click on the link if you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I thought I was being clever, because it was untraditional. That's not even a word. A unique approach to, Christian parenting of the differently wired. And, it's not a formula. It's a unique and unrepeatable thing. And then I don't know.
It's really hard to type in.
It is. I know. Oh, well, what you going to do?
But we are going to make sure that everybody who wants to find you can just come click on the link and find you. So we will take care of that for you. Well, Ginny, thank you so much for joining me here today. It was really lovely. I've learned some things, and it was nice to talk about this. Like I said, it's something that you hear everywhere, but you're right. That's what I've always felt like, is that there was something missing from inside that donut. And so I definitely love your approach to it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And there you have it. Now, if you would like links to any of the books or resources that Ginny and I chatted about today, you can find them on the show notes for this episode of the podcast. Those are at pambarnhill.com/YMB92. Also on the show notes, we have a link for you if you would like to leave a rating or review of the podcast on iTunes. The ratings and reviews that you leave really help us to get the word out about the podcast to brand new listeners. And so we always appreciate everyone who takes the time to do that. Thank you so very, very much. And hey, you can also hit subscribe to the podcast, and we would love to have you back again in a couple of weeks. Until then, keep seeking truth, goodness, and beauty in your homeschool day.